I mean, Torsten highlighted some of the short and medium-term issues. The broad trends in productivity across the G7 have been quite similar, but the UK has done particularly worse, and particularly post-2008. And there isn't really a mystery about some of the things that we need to fix. You know, skills, the investment issues that we've been talking about, planning, infrastructure. But there are, as your question points out, there's an awful lot of change. And if the broad underlying trends are global, then it's not that we don't know what to do, it's about how we do it. And there have been just frequent changes. So I don't mind whether it's called an industrial strategy or not, but some kind of long-term perspective, some kind of strategic approach to managing the economy. I mean, there are other things in the budget that are at the margin helpful. So I think the innovation zones is an interesting idea. But it's quite small scale. It's a 5-year horizon. The different strategies do highlight strengths that we have in the economy, you know, AI, advanced materials and manufacturing, for instance. But if you break it down for each zone and year by year, it's just over 4 million in capex. So over a 5-year period, you might build a lab for that amount of money, but it's not going to transform anything. So it's partly about coordination, it's partly about scale, and it's absolutely about consistency, or rather the lack of consistency. Social view, but we probably need to change something to improve our growth trajectory. So I've long been an advocate for the idea that we're not going to get fast and national growth if we're only flying on the London and South East engine, and there's no, it's not a negative sum game or a zero sum game, that other parts of the country could grow as well. And I don't think there's a single big bet. And you can also overstate the amount of churn, because the different strategies that we were talking about earlier, they do focus on some obvious strengths that we have in the economy. And those strengths are associated with particular places, and that's all perfectly sensible. So one question is, are the bets that we're placing, they don't have to be huge, but are they big enough? Mm-hmm. And I think often they're not big enough. They're small changes spread very thinly. Not everywhere is going to have a cutting-edge biotech centre. Another aspect of this is about infrastructure and enabling the growth. Why we haven't upgraded Northern Rail after all these years of discussion, I do not know. The impact that could have on the productivity, the travel to work area, the career possibilities for two career couples in those northern English cities, it just seemed quite obvious. There's a bizarre way, and I think it's a Treasury-inspired way of looking at these investments project by project, when you need to think about the strategic framework in which they sit. That's improved a little bit with the Green Book revision. But it isn't just, does this single railway line deliver the return that's needed for the public investment or private investment? It's also, well, what else would we put around that? Can we make sure the bus routes join up to the stations? Can we make sure that the housing can get built, or the laboratories? Okay. So that kind of coordination. Yeah. And coordination is difficult in the centre. It's much easier at local level. So that's part of my case for devolving more powers. And I was pleased to see some small steps in the budget towards further devolution.
Okay, all right.
Longer term problem as well. If you look back to the early 1990s recession, all of the G7 countries saw a big drop in business investment. In other countries it recovered. It didn't in the UK, so we've been at the bottom of that league table ever since. Tax will make a difference, but it's not the only thing that matters, and surveys of employers tend to highlight poor infrastructure and lack of skills, which we've already been talking about. So lining up all of the different things that matter is obviously part of the challenge. So consistency and making the system work as a whole.
Yeah.
Well, if you talk to companies in research sectors, the main complaint I hear for sure is about lack of appropriate skills. And it's not a lack of people with PhDs who are having brilliant ideas. It's those mid-level technical skills, it's the lab technicians, that kind of level of skill. And that takes you to the issues that I think Paul raised earlier about further education, about apprenticeships, about the pathways. And these are also quite granular skills. They're very different. You might need a different kind of electrician in a certain sector. And that's where the local knowledge comes in. So around Cambridge, it's a life sciences and information technology cluster. In other parts of the country, in advanced materials or manufacturing, it'll be other kinds of skills. So figuring out how the system can respond to those very local, very granular needs is part of the puzzle as well. But I completely agree with you about investing in the people as well as investing in the equipment and the buildings.